right. Well, hello. Welcome back to Shit They Don't Tell You. I'm Nikki Limo.
My name is Steve Green. Hello.
And today, I am so excited. We have Mark Manson here with us. He's the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, a book that I quote quite often on Shit They Don't Tell You because it's a lot of shit that they don't tell you.
Yeah. We wholesale just read your book.
We just read it every
all
episode.
the time. Whole passages. Yeah.
My lawyer will be in touch.
Okay. And we make money off of it because we do a Patreon. It's really great. It's been lucrative for us. Very lucrative.
I think that every chapter of almost every chapter that I've read from you is like, it could be a whole episode, but we've not done that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you have a new book out called Everything is Fucked, a book of hope.
A book about hope.
A book about hope.
Yeah.
Yes, I have it. I pre-ordered it. And we were just talking before we started the podcast that writing a second book is hard. Yes.
Yes.
Writing a book is hard, but
yeah. I was very naive going into it. I'm like, I've written a book before. I know how this works.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's like it's never. I guess it's like having kids. It never goes the same way, and one doesn't necessarily prepare you for the next one. And then on top of that, there's just all this pressure and expectation because the first one did so well.
Because the first book was so good.
But that's your first book, and it did that well.
Yeah.
That's got to be were you just a nightmare for a year after that? Because you're just like, what the fuck am I going to do? You know what I mean?
A little bit. I mean, I wasn't a nightmare towards other people, but it was a little bit of a nightmare myself.
Exactly.
Like, it messed with me a lot. Because I wrote that book, I started writing that book when I was 30. And so, if you have the expectation of I'm going to write for 30, until I'm like old.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have like 20 books in my life, and your first one crushes it that fucking hard.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere.
It just sets you up for like, oh great, it's all downhill from here.
Right.
It's like great, I peaked at 30. Fuck.
It's got to feel that way, right?
It totally, like, it was a big cloud that kind of hung over me.
You know who else feels that way? Eminem.
Yeah.
My idol and hero. Some Shady LP.
Because some Shady
Some
LP
Shady
did so well.
LP did so well.
As we all
He's
know.
like, how am I going to top it? And then Marshall Mathers LP did even better.
As we all know.
And then Eminem Show, even fucking better than that.
These are just
And
stories they tell the
they
kids
just kind of
around the
crashed.
campfire.
They just kind of went off a cliff. So maybe after that, maybe just we just don't do drugs after the third one.
Yeah.
I feel like it's funny. I feel like there was probably a sweet spot of success that would have been just all good.
Yeah.
It's like if it had stopped at like, and again,
Yeah, you can't complain.
Warning, I'm not complaining about any of this, but I'm just saying that, like, in terms of like psychological impact, I think if it stopped at like 1 or 2 million, it would have been like, wow, damn, that was like, I killed it. Now let's do even better, but it's at this point, it's like,
it's so high. The bar is so high.
It's pushing 9 million and it's still going.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And just to give people an idea, I think there's only been like maybe a dozen books that have sold 10 million copies in the last 20 years.
Wow.
So it's just.
So please don't buy his book. Don't buy his subtle art.
Don't
buy the new one.
Buy the new one.
Please.
Buy the
He's
new
got
one.
enough problems.
Actually, we're going to talk about that later because one of the chapters in the newest book that you should buy,
Yes.
the one that you should
Buy his fucking book.
is about pain and how we all have it and how just like some people's pain is better pain. So like you selling 10 million books is a better pain.
It's a much
than
better problem.
some people that are like, how do I sell one book?
Yeah. It's a good problem to have.
Can I say that you started the fuck in titles thing and now everyone's fucking doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's you every time, and I'm always like, wait, is that him? Oh, no. It's not.
Dude, I went to the airport and like the first top shelf was all like,
Yeah, they
fuck
have a
your
full
feelings,
shelf.
fuck your
Everything's fucked.
I'm like,
Everything's fucked.
Yeah, everything.
I feel attacked in this section
Right.
of the bookstore.
And I'm like, oh, come on, man. They're all just trying to ride.
They
Yeah,
are,
yeah.
man.
No, it
They
started
are.
a trend.
But it's I'm the original. I'm the OG.
You're the original
OG.
fuck.
I'm the original fuck giver.
And we're the you in the podcast. See, we got the shit.
Oh yeah, we got shit.
We get the shit. They
Yeah,
don't,
we're edgy too. Okay.
We're edgy, bro.
We're edgy, bro.
I think it was probably because it did so well, and people before them were like, "Oh, you can't put like vulgarity in a title."
Well,
and
it was so funny because it was such a controversial decision.
Yeah.
With the publisher, so we shopped the book. My agent and I shopped the book. I think we had 8 different publishers that were interested. And we proposed the title, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, but we also mentioned that we'd be open to like not doing a fuck title. And I think out of the 8 publishers, I think 6 of them said we were absolutely not going to put the F word in the title. And then Harper was the only one who was kind of like, actually, I think, like, let's take a shot. Like, let's see if this works.
It sets you apart.
And I wasn't sure about it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God, am I sabotaging myself? My first book of my career.
Should have done that. Should have sabotaged.
Yep.
Yeah.
Should have overthought. Should have overthought.
Be all
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, I feel for you.
But yeah, it's now it's like now books that don't have no business having fuck in the title are like
saying.
ramming fuck.
Martha Stewart got a fuck cookbook now. You know what I mean? Like, no, you know what I mean? It's like that.
The
It's
Bible's like fucking believe in Jesus.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like the fucking Bible.
Exactly. It's like what DC did with their Justice League. It's like they had to copy the success of Marvel, so
Yep.
it's the same shit.
Yep.
It's so true, but you know what it is, I think, is because, well, what was so captivating about that title is that we all do give so many fucks and we all don't want to. And like, when you're in a relationship, it's like the person who cares less wins and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think people initially like are drawn to that. And then you find out it's not really about how to not give a fuck. It's about like how to place your fucks in the right
Yes.
place and like actually do give fucks, but to very select few things.
Yeah.
And I love that philosophy.
It's funny. A reader said that the book was like a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's like, oh, I don't want to give a fuck. Like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, let me buy this. And then you buy it and you're like, oh, shit, it's about my values and what I'm choosing to find important in my life. And but it's like that's the message people need.
Yes.
And so the title is kind of just a fun way of tricking people into like
getting into the mainstream. Yeah. The fuckboys that are like, yeah, I'm going to get girls.
yeah, I don't give a fuck.
Oh, shit, I just raised my moral values.
Exactly.
No, I love that because it's just like, it's almost like a voice of cynical optimism.
Yeah.
Which I'm kind of a personal development book junkie.
Sure.
Like I read all of them. I read the spiritual Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer ones. I read like the Anthony Robbins motivation
Don't
ones.
tell me his competitors. The man's right
John
here.
C. Maxwell. This is a different genre
These are his
altogether. Is what I'm
competitors.
saying.
It is a different
genre. Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying that I read all those books and none of them have my voice that's in my head.
Sure.
It's all like just some like wiser person that's like, here's how to be more profound. And I feel like reading your book, I feel like I'm just having a conversation with my husband who you have very similar concepts and different ways of wording them. And I
Sure.
really like your stories that you tell with each of your points. Like you use historical references, you use like science research, scientific research, psychological
These
studies.
things I'm incapable of. See,
He's incapable. He just
these are
rants
the-
about his theories, but
these are
he
the-
doesn't give me
the
some
edge you got.
hardcore proof. I need to know numbers. I need to know studies. Did Harvard
Yep.
look into this?
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you read like that gives you all like the like all your stories? Like where, like what source? What's your like go-to material?
I'm just a reading
A well-read man.
omnivore. Like I just love everything. I read fiction, nonfiction. I read history. I read biographies. I read academic work. A lot of like the research side of it comes from. It very much is a part of like the business. So I have a research assistant, and so when I have an idea for an article or a chapter in a book, and I'm unsure of like exactly what. I want to
back
make
it up.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get the research right and make sure I'm like getting all the data right. I'll talk.
checker.
I'll talk to my research assistant, and we'll go through a bunch of the most prominent studies about a subject. But generally speaking, like when I'm, I guess in like brainstorm mode for the book, I'm just reading lots and lots of different stuff.
Yeah.
And looking for examples of like really extreme examples of human experience.
Yeah.
I think that's what all the stories in my books have in common, because they are completely different. You'll get like a Japanese World War II guy, and then I
love that story.
And then you'll get like my high school girlfriend cheating on me, and like, but what they both demonstrate is how values affect behavior and affect commitment. And so you can just draw some really cool parallels and.
Yeah, you use like gnarly historic references and then relate them to yourselves, and then we're able to relate them to stuff that happened in our lives, and it's like, God damn it, I like that.
Can I ask too, when it comes to like your philosophy, have you always had this philosophy where it's like, hey, I don't give a fuck, it's only about like a couple people close to you, and those are the people you should give the most fucks about, and then let the noise kind of go away?
Yeah.
Or is this like almost like an attack on a younger version of yourself that maybe gave too many fucks, and that's what created the person you are now?
It's definitely an attack. So
Me too.
I used to be like you. I used to read all this. I used to be a self-help junkie.
Yeah.
And and it helped me a lot. Like I read a bunch of stuff in my teens and my early 20s, and it was great. It really did some amazing things for me. But by my mid 20s, I was becoming kind of disillusioned, and I noticed that a lot of people that I was friends with or knew from that world that were really into that stuff were kind of fucked up. and, and a lot of things in my life started kind of fucking up and weird. So it's like I was successful on paper, but like my relationships were a mess, and my like beliefs about myself and the world were kind of a mess. And so I became very disillusioned with it, with the traditional self-help world. And kind of at the same time when I was writing online, I started doing a lot of research into the psychological, like academic data in terms of like psychology and everything. And when you dive into all the data in psychology, one of the first things you realize is that humans suck. Like we're like humans are just fucking awful. Like our brains are really inefficient. Our beliefs are inaccurate. Our perceptions are inaccurate. We're very self-serving, self-absorbed. And it's a lot of what our emotions and our ideas about success and happiness and failure and everything are really arbitrary and kind of made up. And so the whole goal with Subtle Art, and it's continued with this last book too, is that I wanted to write a self-help book that essentially was a pessimistic self-help book.
Yeah.
You know, it's like most self-help is like, you can do anything
Yeah.
Yes.
and just believe in yourself, and there's the
They hype
sky's
you
the
up.
limit,
Yeah.
you know, and I wanted to write a self-help book which was like, look, you're a piece of shit, I'm a piece of shit, but it's okay. Like, let's just try to be less shitty. And because that's really, I think that's a more accurate reflection of the world.
Yeah,
It's something I've tried to
agree.
tell people for years, where it's
Right.
like, well, it's really just nobody's better than you because we all kind of suck.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why do you look at somebody else and go like, holy shit, I can't do that because they're probably better than me. They
Yeah.
have some special skill that I lack that I don't have. So I probably can't do what they're doing because they're special and I'm not. But I'm like, dude, nobody's special, and that's why anyone can do anything.
Yeah,
And that's how I do it.
Exactly. It's yeah, we're all just our own what's the quote from Fight Club? It's like we're all the singing, dancing like shit of the world or something
Right.
like
You would know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, so a little bit, let's get into your newest book.
Sure.
Yeah, because that's a lot of his old book, okay?
Yeah,
you just
man,
need to sell
it's-
those.
I'm
over it. I'm over
We're
it.
over
That's right.
that. It's so 2017.
Will Dead Poet Society have you rip up your book right now? You know what I mean? Sand on the table, rip it up.
So Everything is Fucked, a book about hope.
A book about hope.
Which also starts with some cool heroic story. Like
Yes.
in comparison to the Japanese one
Yes.
from Subtle Art. I liked this story as well.
Yeah.
About, I don't want to spoil it. You guys have to read the first chapter, but it's like about just like this badass dude that went into Auschwitz in a concentration camp and like survived and helped a bunch of prisoners and like was telling everybody that this was happening. No one believed him, and then he like snuck out and he was just like,
He is the most. His name's Witold Pilecki. He's the most badass person I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
I've wanted to write about him for years. So he's the only person who ever voluntarily entered a concentration camp. And I think in all of World War II, only like 140 people ever escaped from a concentration camp and survived. And he was one of them as well.
Wow.
And so he like basically snuck in, spent 2 years there, helped like hundreds of people, and then snuck out.
yeah.
Wow.
Which is like,
And I
That's
feel like
badass.
you're like elite
I used to
level
think
badass.
that Triple H from WWE was the most badass dude, but this guy's way up there.
Yeah.
and I feel like you get the feeling like he chose like to exit, like he just gave up because he thought like his army was gonna come like bust the camp down, and so he like stayed there. But then he's like, oh, they're not coming, so I guess I'll leave now.
I guess I should leave now. Yeah. Oh, I guess I'll sneak out of Auschwitz now.
Yeah. But I love it because you say in that first chapter that the opposite of happiness is not sadness or any
Yeah.
of that. It's actually hopelessness.
Yes.
So
It's a feeling as though you have nothing to look forward to. There's no
Right.
meaning to anything you do.
and that a lot of like mental illnesses are kind of
Yeah.
related to that lack
Yeah.
of hopelessness or lack of hope.
Yeah.
A
So if you
crisis
look
of
at,
hope.
I kind of like lump a bunch of stuff together. I call them crises of hope, but you could kind of think of them as like crises of meaning. So like, for instance, depression. Essentially what depression, often depression occurs with sadness, but it's not the same thing as sadness. What depression is it's a sense that nothing you do matters.
Right.
That there's no point to like getting up and recording a podcast or whatever. Anxiety is also kind of a crisis of meaning or crisis of hope, except whereas depression, you feel like there's no point in doing anything now. Anxiety is this sense that anything you do now is gonna fail. It's gonna the meaning you hope for is just never gonna come. It's never gonna materialize. And so when you look at statistically, when you look at the world right now, essentially like where life is better today than it's ever been. Where we live longer, there's less violence, there's less crime, we're healthier, more educated. I mean, it's just there's a laundry list of things that are better than they've ever been. And the only things that are getting worse are these crises of meaning or these crises of hope. Depression, anxiety, suicide, drug overdoses are all on the rise. And they're on the rise in the richest and most comfortable parts of the world. And so that's a real... It's a bit of a mind fuck.
Yeah.
So it's like what you would think that like the richer and safer and more comfortable a society gets, the happier and more stable the people would become. But we're actually observing the opposite.
Right.
And so the whole book is kind of diving into that.
So like why?
It's like what is it about like modern 21st century society that makes it so hard to develop and maintain a sense of meaning or a sense of hope for yourself?
Do you think it's kind of like when you're reading a book and there's no conflict in it and you get bored of it and you want to walk away? Like I think there's a lot of that in life.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's one of the things, I mean, not to spoil too much, but about halfway through the book, I do another like Trojan horse type thing with the reader, which is I point out exactly what you just said, is that hope requires some conflict. Like for you to hope for a better future, there has to be something about the present that you reject, that you're unsatisfied with. And so essentially what that means is that the better and better our world gets, the harder and harder we have to strain to find something that we perceive to be wrong with it.
For sure.
And then you get people like getting upset over, I don't know, nipple slips and
of course
tweets that somebody said somewhere. You know?
Or somebody took somebody's haircut or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what's so fascinating is that even people in the lower economic status of today live better than kings did.
Oh, absolutely.
And nobody really like ever puts that together. And like I have a friend who's from Vietnam, and she lived in like a real shitty area.
Real shit, yeah.
Real shitty and real shitty circumstances. She had like when she moved here, she was like, I have a refrigerator. This is incredible. Like you know what I mean? Like
Oh my god! So just this story of this guy that came looking for donations. So he was like knocking door to door, and like he would start his speech off telling them like how impoverished and poor he was and how poor his family was, and she outpoured him. She was like,
she stood at the
I'm
door.
from Vietnam. I had to pee in the dirt.
Yep.
We didn't have flooring. We didn't have beds. We slept in the dirt.
I didn't know what a toilet was.
Yeah.
I called that a hole in the ground. Like she really. I mean, it's
He
amazing.
was like, damn.
Wow. And the cat like donated money to her. Yeah. Well, no, he should have.
Yeah.
But he should have.
That reminds me. I have a friend who's one of my good friends. His parents were like Indian immigrants, like straight off the boat.
Yeah.
And he was telling me once that when he was growing up, a bunch of his friends were going on a camping trip, and he's like, hey mom, hey dad, like, can I go on this camping trip? And his parents were like, what's camping? And he's like, well, basically you go out in the woods and you sleep in like a small tent, and you eat like you barely eat, and you like poop next to trees. And like his parents looked at him like he was absolutely out of his, and like they got upset. They were like, we came all the way to America, we worked our asses off for 30 years, you are not going to poop in the woods, you are not going to sleep under the stars.
It's like an effrontery to everything they did.
Yeah, like
I love that.
They were so offended that he wanted to go do this. And so yeah, he had to tell his friends. He's like, I can't go.
That's so
My
funny.
parents won't let me.
That's
he
my
legit
friend.
wouldn't let him
That's
go.
my friend, dude. My friend's like even poor people own cars and they have fridges
Yeah.
and television sets and
Yeah, she told us that for air conditioning, because it gets really hot in Vietnam,
Yeah.
that she would have to use the back of her mom's arm because it was cool.
Yeah.
And so she would press her face against it, and she's like, "That was my air conditioning."
Oh my
I was
god.
like, "Oh my god."
yeah.
But it's crazy. It's like, even if you look at our country, people. One thing that's just true of all humans, like, we get very nostalgic. We idealize the past, and so a lot of people have very idealized memories of, say, like the 1990s or the 1980s or the 1950s or whatever. And it's like, you go back to any decade, and shit was really fucked up. Like, really, really fucked up. Like, people were, just as recently as like the 80s, people, like, pregnant women were smoking and drinking beer and like, and it's like, I think it was domestic abuse in the 50s was like, I think it was like 60 or 70% of homes like had domestic abuse in them. And so there's all these statistics and things that we forget about. And that we emotionally, I guess more importantly, we emotionally forget about it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have had this experience recently of like watching a classic movie and then just being absolutely horrified at how fucked up it was. Like, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Breakfast at Tiffany's. Like, it was the most like the guy was like borderline.
The Asian impression, right?
No. Well,
there's-
that is that. But
There's stuff like that, but I mean, like,
But the whole premise of the movie.
like romantic narratives from the 70s and 80s. It's like borderline stalking and raping. Like, it's absolutely
for sure.
it's like guys like physically like dragging women into their cars,
Yeah,
and
like
like
Grease.
slapping them
Yeah.
if they're too hysterical.
yeah, and it's like, this was like a romantic movie, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You're right.
Like, if you have emotions, you're hysterical and you get slapped.
Dude, I know. Even Sean Connery, like in Russia with Love, he like backhands a chick across the face, and he's like, "Don't talk to me like that." You know, like all the time in those
Yeah.
movies, and we're all like, "Yeah, James Bond, fucking."
Yeah, man. So it's the world is
Yeah, you call it the paradox of progress. Is that? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and in the academic literature, it's called the Easterlin paradox. Because
That's less fun.
that doesn't reach me.
The guy was named Greg Easterlin, I think.
Oh,
He needs to
so
work
he
on his
named it after
branding.
himself.
Yeah,
Get a better last name,
Yeah.
Easterlin.
it needs to be the rise of the paradox or some shit.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
everything now is in
Yeah.
our culture. The fucking rise of everything.
Yeah, but yeah, it's the paradox of progress, and the other thing too, I think there's a few things going on with this, but one of them is that it's much harder to know what to hope for. Like, it's that need for conflict. I think another one too is just that the better life gets, the more you have to lose. It's like, if you think like a farmer in Africa or something, like, the worst thing that can happen is his crops don't grow as well as they did last year or whatever. It's like, the worst thing that can happen to you or me, there's a lot of shit that can go wrong. It's like, there's a lot to lose, essentially. And so I think that brings with it just kind of this constant anxiety
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily exist in other places.
Yeah, can I say, when I watch or when I see a news story about like some rich person who's losing all their money, I'm always like, oh, I really feel bad for them, because they had so much more to lose. Like, they're gonna lose their jet.
The
and all this
lifestyle
sick
is
shit.
completely shifted.
Yeah, and I really genuinely do feel terrible
Yeah.
for them, and only because I'm like, dang, dude, that sucks to tumble from that mountain.
It's gotta really mess with you, and it's there. Our minds are constantly adjusting its expectations to like what we've recently experienced. Like, I'm going through this with this new book right now. It's like, again, Subtle Art performs so well that I'm sitting there, like, my book dropped from like 25 to 50 on Amazon today, and I was bummed out. And I'm like, and it's just, that's insanity. Like,
Yeah.
there are like a million authors on this planet that would kill somebody to be number 50 on Amazon. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh God, like, drop to 50, like, oh shit, like, what am I doing wrong? But it's our minds just naturally do that.
Yeah.
It's just whatever we've experienced recently is like, that's the new normal.
Yeah.
And so when things are constantly getting better, you're just raising the stakes all
Right.
the time, because it's a higher and higher bar to clear every time to maintain your sense of happiness or a sense of stability.
Yeah, because why would you ever want to go back?
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
You know?
So this is why we all have to picket picket Outback Steakhouse because they're appropriating Australian cuisine or whatever. You know what I mean?
Because you have to find something.
You gotta find the juice, man. You gotta fucking squeeze out that thing.
You gotta find something.
And on that note, we are gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about a specific chapter in this book that I think is very interesting. So, stay tuned. So the 2019 FabFitFun Summer Box is on sale now. You can treat yourselves with items in it, such as a Sutra Professional Mini Travel Blow Dryer, something I could have used at an Airbnb where they did not have a blow dryer. You'd think they would, but they didn't.
Why?
I don't know. I don't own the Airbnb.
Did you tell them that they didn't have a blow dryer so that they could improve their service?
They weren't there. But I had a really bad time with wet hair without that blow dryer. Wish I could have had that. They also have a Vicks Paula Hermione Lotus towel, which would have also dried my hair. Would have been great for drying my hair.
FabFitFun is a seasonal subscription box delivered 4 times a year with full-size beauty, fashion, home, fitness, and wellness products for just $49.99 a box.
Yeah, and it's full-size products, so there's no samples of anything, which is what I love about it. Like, they sent... Dude, honestly, I love this box because they sent this makeup setting spray from Kula, which is one of my favorite freaking brands. It's all like organic sunscreen products. And they also had this rose spray that just is like super refreshing and moisturizing throughout the day. And I had just run out of a similar spray that wasn't as good of a quality. So super stoked on that. Was not a sample size. Was definitely a full size.
That's sick. That's what I need. I don't like samples of anything.
So the 2019 summer box total retail value is $269.95 to up to $467.95, but you can get it for $49.99 a box.
That's fantastic value.
Also, in my summer box, I got a Jennifer Zuner star double necklace, which I'm actually wearing right now. I wish you could see it. It's super cute. You could style it with anything. And that necklace alone was $50. It retails for $50.
So you got the full value of the box in one
and
necklace.
More in one necklace. Yeah, because the full value or the full box price is only $39.99.
How do they do it?
I don't know. I feel like I'm robbing them.
Many products' individual value is more than the entire cost of the box. Did you know that?
I did, actually, because I had the sheet and I was like, oh, dang, that's crazy. We are stealing from these people.
I'm looking at the same sheet. Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's actually not even a sheet. It's a magazine. Every box comes with like a catalog of all the products and stuff and articles. Cute little articles. You might want to subscribe just for the articles.
Listen, sign up for FabFitFun today. These boxes always sell out. Use our code YOU to get $10 off your first box. Go to fabfitfun.com to sign up and start getting the box for a life well lived.
Yeah, you can use the promo code YOU to get $10 off your first box. That's over $200 for only $39.99. So go to fabfitfun.com and use our code YOU. Get $10 off your first FabFitFun box. And we're back, and we're going to talk more about the new book that I think is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
I didn't even say that. Yeah, I've been reading it. And
Do you like it better than the first book?
I can't say better.
Okay.
Because it's like the same style. Like if you liked the first book, then you like this book.
I
Because
see.
it's the same style of writing, and it's just different points. Like it's different. We're talking about different subjects.
It's like another season of your favorite show.
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I like it better, but...
You like it better?
But I feel like as an artist, you always like the last thing you did is always your favorite thing.
Right.
True.
So
I agree.
yeah.
I haven't read, so I've read the whole book of the first one. I haven't gotten through the whole book yet of the second one. I've only read the first 2 chapters and then this chapter that I'm going to talk about right now because I just had to jump there because it's like great, and I feel like Steve and I talk about this all the time, and it's almost like a topic that like I wish more people would know, but I don't articulate it that well. So I'm like, I do a bad job at letting people know about this. So buy this book so you can read a better version of it. But yeah, it's about pain being the universal constant.
Yeah.
And I love the way it started was you have quite a few like studies that you pull from in this one. That's just why I'm like, how do you find these? These are great. These are just great, like supporting arguments and stuff. But the first one, the blue dot
effect
was crazy because
Yes.
it makes sense at why society is acting like how it's acting.
Yeah.
And it's also fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
So will you
Sure.
talk about that?
So, and this ties in well to kind of what we ended with
Yeah.
before about like having higher and higher bars to clear to maintain that happiness. So the blue dot effect, it was a study. It was done by, it's kind of like if there was an all-star team of psych researchers, they came together and did this last year, and it was just an amazing experiment. So essentially, what they did, the reason I gave it the name the blue dot effect, just to make it easier for the reader. But the original experiment was they just brought people in and they showed them dots that were some either blue, purple, or like some shade in between, and then they just told people, they said, if you think the dot's blue, hit this button. If you think the dot's purple, hit this button. And originally, and I always get this backwards, but I think originally what they did is they showed like most of the dots that they showed were blue, and then a few of them were purple, and a few of them were some shade in between. And then as the experiment went on, they showed fewer and fewer blue dots. But as they showed fewer blue dots, people started mistaking purple dots
For blue dots.
as being blue.
Because they were expecting.
Yes, they were expecting a certain number of blue dots. And so essentially what they're showing is that when our mind expects a certain amount of an experience, it will warp its perceptions to fit that expectation. And so where the experiment got really interesting is that they did the same thing, except now they took friendly and threatening faces. And originally they showed mostly friendly faces with just a few threatening. Or wait, no, I think it was the other way around.
Either way.
Yeah, they showed mostly threatening faces with just a few friendly. And then as it went on, they showed fewer and fewer threatening faces, and people started mistaking friendly faces as being threatening. And then they did the same thing with ethical and unethical job proposals. They did it with a bunch of stuff. And it basically, what it broke down to was that people expect to see a certain amount of threat or conflict in their life. And if it's not there, their mind will start inventing it.
Yeah. It'll start projecting it onto other things that would normally be just neutral or fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how we got the hills and Laguna Beach and all of some of the greatest shows in the
content
history
of television
exactly.
history. Yes.
Nothing beats in those shows when a girl starts crying and then two girls start hugging her from different angles. I'm always like, man, we live in the greatest time in history when this shit is what's up, dude.
But it's crazy because I think this explains so much about what's going on. It explains a lot of like PC culture that's been happening, where like words are violence now.
Yeah.
And it's like the only person who can actually with a straight face say that a word is violence is somebody who's never experienced violence.
Of course.
You know, like, and then, you know, on the other side, you have people, thinking that they're, because the mall doesn't have a Christmas tree now, Christians are being persecuted.
Yeah.
So
It's a war. It's not persecution. It's a war,
It's
my
a
friend.
war on
It's a
Christmas.
war on
War.
Christmas.
Yeah.
And so
The
it's like
best.
clearly you haven't actually been persecuted. But it's stuff like, the anti-vaccination thing, flat earthers. It's just there's like this crazy need for pretty much all these subgroups of people to find to essentially like I'm gonna mispronounce this word, but it's catastrophize.
Oh.
Catastrophize small incidents into something that's major and seems life-threatening. And again, it's in a desperate attempt to maintain that sense of meaning, that sense of hope in their life. And
dude, that's like, do you know the theory that the Beatles, Paul McCartney died in 1965? Yeah, because he got his head cut off in a traffic accident.
It was in an accident.
And they replaced him with another Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, the Beatles got better. What do we care? New Paul McCartney was better than the old Paul McCartney. He did Wings. He did fucking incredible. Like that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. It's a really messed up place to be. And I don't know, because the problem is that when we're like making huge problems out of things that are actually very insignificant, it's hard to deal with problems that are actually significant.
Right.
It's like if me using a certain word or making a joke about a certain person is, violent, just as violent as like people getting shot at school, then
the word violence gets diluted.
Exactly. The word violence stops meaning anything. The word oppression stops meaning anything. The word war stops meaning anything. And so we're actually just harming ourselves by misinterpreting or misperceiving all these problems in our lives.
So how does it relate to pain? Because most people are like, I want to avoid pain because ouchies.
Yeah.
But you talk about like that you should actually be doing the opposite, which is pursue pain, because avoiding pain makes a fragile culture, basically. It makes us more fragile.
So this is where pain being a universal constant comes in, is that if you are constantly seeking more comfort, more security, you don't actually feel less pain. You just start perceiving pain in smaller and smaller things. So the pain is constant in your life. And this goes the other way too. Like if people who like come from war-torn areas or grow up with a lot of abuse, like they actually become accustomed to it. Like their brain adjusts to it, and that becomes the new normal, even though they're just enduring a massive amount of pain. And so I think the same way you need to keep your body healthy, you need to like break down your muscles in a very controlled and systematic manner to promote growth and strength and resilience. I think we need to kind of treat our mental health as a muscle, and it needs to be systematically and in a very controlled way challenged and broken down a little bit so that it can get stronger and stronger. And I think, I think a lot of people, when they kind of complain that people are soft or weak these days, like that's kind of what we don't really want to go back to like Mad Men days where, dad is drinking scotch at 10 a.m. and like throwing shit at the kids. Like we don't really want to go back to that. But what
sounds like me today, but
But what we do want to go back to is when there was some expectation of you need to suffer a little and you need to develop resilience for yourself, because not only is it good for you, but we can't have a society of fragile oversensitive people. Like we can't function that way.
It almost like misplaces meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
People are fighting for the wrong things.
Yeah. I mean, it's in subtle art. I talked about it. I said, a good life is not a life without problems. A good life is a life with good problems. And I think pain as a universal constant kind of gets at that definition of what a good problem is. Like if you are freaking the fuck out because there's not a Christmas tree at the mall, or whatever, like that's not a very good problem to be upset about. In the grand scheme of things, like that's not going to affect much.
But it just doesn't feel like Christmas.
Right.
I've heard people say
So
shit like that. I
true.
love it.
Or when Starbucks changed those cups.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like, we don't get a red
I just
cup.
can't
Are
get
you
in the
fucking
same
kidding
spirit.
me?
Yeah.
But this is what I don't. It's like, since when do you deserve to get in that spirit? Like, what the fuck did you do lately that like lets you? It was funny. I was on another show.
Well, we know what side Mark's on for the War of Christmas. Damn.
Clearly.
Dang, telegraphed already.
But I was on a show a few weeks ago, and it was a pretty prominent like self-help podcaster, and they were saying, they're like, well, people deserve to be happy, and I was like, since when? Like, like who says you deserve anything? Like, since when do you deserve to feel anything? And it's like, fuck you, go do something. Like, you have to go earn happiness. You don't just sit around and deserve it. You don't get to deserve the world treating you a certain way or living up to your expectations. You have to go create those expectations.
Only now would people even say this shit. Like 100 years ago, people were just trying to survive, man.
Oh, dude. Well, or you'd get shot for saying it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, sure.
So it's yeah, I mean, the fact that we can complain about, I mean, to me, it's the fact that we have a flat Earth society is just almost like the crowning achievement of how safe and comfortable and free our society is.
It
You
gives
don't
me
believe
joy.
in the ice wall?
The ice wall.
I've seen some interesting pictures.
Some very interesting pictures.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I'll send them to you.
Yeah.
Of the ice wall.
Of the ice wall. We'll see what you think. Yeah, pretty convincing shit.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
need
pretty
to
convincing shit.
look into this.
I don't think you read the right stuff on Flat Earth.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
you guys.
Yeah, you'll see.
You guys are scaring
If
me.
only. No, I wish. I wish I believed it. I want to.
It would make life
'Cause
so
it's
much
fun.
easier.
This
It's
is like
more
that
fun.
movie Rat Race, and you're on our podcast, and then the logo is changed behind us, and you're on a Flat Earth show.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, brother, let's talk. No, if only.
You know what's funny? I saw a video recently that was talking about how like throughout most of history, conspiracy theories like were very specific about like political, like major political or world events. So it's like JFK's assassination or
The
whatever.
sexiest
Yeah.
by far.
You know, it's and then they were saying that this whole conspiracy theories now, they're just about random dumb shit. It's like
Yes.
Pizzagate. You know, it's like, oh, they're pedophiles at this pizza parlor.
Yeah.
Let's go get them.
Well, the flat earthers believe that it's trying to make people, science is trying to make people not believe in Christianity, and they're doing this by showing you that the world's a sphere.
Here's the thing. Think about how much money gets made off of selling globes to schools.
Yeah.
All that whole industry get wiped out if
Yeah.
if they knew.
The whole the multi-million-dollar globe.
You got to follow the money, Mark.
globe
See?
industry.
That's what I'm saying, brother. Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about all the pictures of the Earth. All that shit, billions of dollars, dude, wiped out.
Dude,
Just like that.
you do a scarily good Alex Jones impression.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll rip my shirt off right now. I will.
Today, when you're talking about like pain and stuff, I have like varying levels of emotions all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think I read books
all
because
do.
I'm like, hey, I'm struggling. How can I like change my philosophy and like think about something throughout the day that like anytime I feel myself getting like some weird emotions, I'm like, oh wait, let's ground ourselves back down because of that thing I read today. But like, yeah, I was mad because I didn't feel like I was making progress in this certain area that I was working very hard in, and I was like, how come I'm like killing myself every day and I don't see any progress? And then it kind of went to that like, it's not worth it. Like I should just quit it, you know, even though it's
Fuck
a
it.
very healthy thing to do. Like I should keep doing this thing.
Sure.
And then I ended up yelling at my lemon tree for not growing lemons, and that's how my morning ended.
That's how my morning began.
That's how his morning began.
I was-
He woke up to you yelling
Yeah,
at lemon
yeah.
tree.
Well, and I think it's that expectation is that like, okay, I'm following all the rules, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm following the rules of like this XYZ will get me this result,
Yes.
ABC result. And I'm doing XYZ and I'm not seeing ABCs. And then I'm looking at my lemon tree and I'm like, I'm taking care of you too. Like, why aren't you growing lemons? It was almost like it was insulting me. Like I have been watering it and it grows flowers and the lemons are supposed to come from the flowers. Yeah, I've had it for over a year, not one single lemon. And I've seen other trees this size that have lemons.
Mark,
Clearly, it's about
I shamed
you.
my lemon
Mark,
tree.
you know science stuff. How do we get a fucking lemon on this tree, man?
Can you, your research assistant, just do a little
Just have
digging?
reach out.
Just,
Hey, let me know, man. Do you know
Is it
anyone with a lemon
normal?
tree?
You know, there's a war on lemon trees
That's
right
awesome.
now.
Yeah.
I
That
knew
not
it.
many people know about this.
I knew it.
But it's a huge crisis. But the
Agreed.
government doesn't want to tell you.
it's
Yeah.
because the world. If the world was round, I would have lemons.
True.
Okay.
yeah, probably.
It's clearly flat.
Probably.
Yeah.
And you know, the government doesn't want us all to have lemon trees because then we would take our lemons and make lemonade.
It makes
That's
too
right.
much sense.
Yeah.
And we'd have organic lemons,
Mark,
and
let
they
me-
want to poison all the food.
Let me ask you: when you say put yourself in a controlled environment for pain, right?
Sure.
Where it's like to help yourself. What is that
It's
controlled
the
environment?
gym. You should go there.
Nice.
No, it was so it is. I mean, it is kind of like a gym, but for your mind. So I think there you can divide it up like intellectually and emotionally. So emotionally, I think it's as simple as having those difficult conversations you tend to avoid, confronting maybe some difficult truths, like maybe you just suck at lemon trees, like
Yeah.
I feel really bad for my future kids, honestly.
I do too. There was she was only yelling at a tree because they don't exist yet.
but I mean it's like confronting those really uncomfortable thoughts and questioning them and like sitting with them is kind of like picking up a weight and lifting it for your feeling brain essentially, and then the same thing for like for your thinking brain. I think it's seeking out different points of view, different perspectives, things that you disagree on, challenging yourself to like learn something new. It's there's all sorts of data like in terms of like old people, this is why like old people do crosswords and sudokus and shit when they're 80 years old, because if they don't, they like deteriorate into dementia. Like it's the best thing you can do for your brain health is to use it. It's just like a muscle. So I think the interesting thing about I guess mental pain is that there's kind of a Goldilocks amount. If you take on way too much pain, you'll traumatize yourself. It's kind of like if you like try to lift way too much weight, you'll just like break your arm. But if you do way too little, you won't develop and grow.
Yeah.
And so there's like a moderate amount that you have to consciously seek and pursue.
Moderate amount of masochism.
Yeah, and make it a habit in your life.
And choose what type of pain.
Yes.
I think that's also
choose important.
Yeah.
Meaningful forms of
You don't
pain.
just like put cigars in your arm every day and be like, I'm growing.
Right. Exactly.
Oh fuck yeah.
This is so much personal growth for me.
Yeah, but I mean, it's fine. Find something that's worth struggling for. That's worth suffering for, and then, seek out that challenge on a continual basis.
Yeah, I like. There's one line in your book that everyone should buy.
Yes, buy his fucking book. Jesus Christ.
Doing great.
The book should have been called
Yeah.
Buy My Fucking Book.
Yeah.
Buy my fucking
That's
book.
your next book. You're welcome.
Buy my fucking book.
Yeah.
Mark Manson.
But the line was to taking away the ability to feel pain for a purpose actually takes away any ability to feel purpose
Yes.
at all. And I like that.
Absolutely.
That's very true. Because
Yeah.
if you have no pain, like like you were saying in the beginning of this whole episode, was that like you're seeing the rise in depression and anxiety and drug use from like the wealthiest place because there's very little pain there, and then it's like they're the ones struggling most for purpose because
Yeah.
very little pain.
I've never felt more what I feel like other people would call depression in my life than when I wrote, starred in, and sold my first movie. It was the first script that we had written, me and my buddy, and we did it, produced it. I got to star in it. That was my dream. And then the after that, you're like, I did my dream. That was all I wanted to do.
Man.
And it's just such a weird feeling after that.
The same thing happened to me. I mean, this was part of what inspired the Hope book. Is the same thing happened to me after Subtle Art, and it was weird because like I'd been pretty depressed as a teenager, and then suddenly I'm sitting here. I'm 32. I like literally.
86?
Literally, what's that?
Are you 86?
No. Now I'm 35.
Oh.
So.
Oh, I see.
I'm 84.
Okay.
So it's literally my dream came true. It went better than I could have ever imagined it would go. And I felt exactly the same. I had everything I wanted. I had a shitload of money. I was like kicking it at home, taking the wife to Paris and all this shit. And I'm like sitting there feeling exactly the same way I did when I was 18 and had nothing and couldn't do anything. And I was like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
Like, what's the common thread there? And essentially what I came down, the conclusion I arrived at was that it's about having some vision of a better future, like knowing what you can do to make your life better. When I was 17, 18, I felt powerless. I felt like there was nothing I could do to make my life better. And then when I was 32, and
You're kicking too much ass. And
I was
you're
kicking
like,
too much
"There's
ass,
no more."
I felt like there was nothing I could do to make my life better.
All the asses were
Makes
kicked.
so much sense.
Exactly. So there was.
Huh.
So I just kind of despaired for a
That's
while.
amazing.
How'd you get out of it?
It's interesting actually. I the first thing that kind of kicked me out of it, and I talk about him a lot in the new book, was I started reading philosophy again, first time since college, and I read Kant, and Kant just had this like amazing view about life of like, hey, your feelings don't fucking matter. There's a right and a wrong, and it's very like you can figure it out and just go do it. It doesn't matter if you don't need to hope for anything necessarily. And that was hugely inspiring for me. And then from there, I think it's once I really kind of started digging into this next book, I challenged myself. I said, you know what, like forget sales, forget bestseller lists and all that stuff. Just write a better book. And if you can write a better book, then no matter what happens, you'll be proud of it. And so as soon as I found that and kind of got locked into that challenge, things got good again.
That's awesome.
So
That's great.
You're going on tour. You're on tour right now.
I am on tour.
I'm so stupid, and I assumed that Mark lived here, and I was like, "Yeah, swing by the studio."
Shit,
you know,
they don't tell you. Mark lives in New York.
Whoops.
Fresh info.
Not everyone lives in LA. I didn't. So they don't tell you.
Yeah, I'm going straight to my event from here, actually.
That's
so.
awesome. Yeah. So, how long is your tour?
I think it goes to mid-June. So North America goes until mid-June,
Okay.
and then I'm going to Australia and UK in July.
Well, there you go.
When you talk about
Check that
real quick,
out.
when you talk about when you were, like I asked you earlier if this is an attack on your former self, because I feel like in a lot of ways the way that I am now, where I'm like pretty pro bullying because I think it's good for people, like. I just do. I don't know, whatever. A lot of people don't like that about me. It's fine. Not like vicious, savage bullying or
not
whatever,
like
but
getting
all this shit where it's like, oh, we got to ban bullies or whatever. It's like, dude, bullying got me where I am, made me who I am, in my opinion. Like all that shit that I had to get out of, and I didn't even go through anything that crazy compared to, I'm sure, a lot of people out there. It's just that for me, it was the world, me versus the world, and I got out of it.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like I could do battle in this world because I survived.
Well, like he said, a
shitty middle
moderate
school
amount
stuff.
of pain.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's the bullying. I mean, we don't need to go down a tangent, but like I think
Everyone should bully.
No. All I'm saying,
should all bully.
all I'm saying is
there's nuance to that.
I'm
statement.
bullying I'm bullying my former self that I did
Yes.
not like, who I felt like took everything very seriously and personally and all these other things, right? That's all I'm saying. For you, you said that it's very much an attack for you too.
Yeah.
Who was this Mark that was like that?
I was very much I was all about, I had a bunch of goals that I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to build a business. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to learn a bunch of languages. I wanted to, do meditation retreats and read all these books. And it was like, everything was just like this checklist of like, I'm kicking ass at this and this and this and this and this. And I think what it took me a long time to figure out is that when you're so immersed in the self-help lifestyle, because essentially anything that's self-help related, it is making you think about yourself. And so when you build your whole lifestyle around like self-help stuff, you're essentially just building your whole life around yourself. And I think I became a very self-centered and self-absorbed person without realizing it. Like it took a number of relationships kind of falling apart for me to realize that. And then I had some friends who were also immersed in this like self-help lifestyle. And I got to be on the receiving end of their self-absorption and their self-centeredness. And that started, and and these were people that I was like, I thought they had it all I thought they had it all figured out. And suddenly they're just being like the coldest dicks and completely delusional about stuff. And I was like, wow, maybe there's something I missed with all this. And that's when I started kind of doing a lot of questioning and a lot more reading, and I started realizing like, if there's not a why to this stuff, none of it really matters. It was like I was trying to go to more and more countries just so I could say I went to more and more countries.
Yeah.
There's so many people like that, man.
That's so true.
It's like I was just reading books so I could say that I read them, and I never realized. I'm like,
I feel attacked.
no, but it's like I never stopped and asked myself like, well, what's the point? Like, what's the end point here? Like, at some point you have to decide, I'm good enough. Like, I'm pretty good. Like, life's good. I don't need to do all this stuff anymore. And so that was I guess that was the old self that I was trying to butcher a little bit. In subtle art, and that's where all the you are not special, the importance of mediocrity, it's don't try to find out who you are. It's better to just not know. Commitment is actually far more freeing than lack of commitment. And that's continued in the second book as well. So
That's such an uncool thing to say out loud, but it's so true.
It is so true. It is absolutely true. There's a whole chapter in the new book about freedom, and I argue that we need to reevaluate our definition of freedom, because right now I think our culture assumes that freedom is just having a lack of restraint, and I make the argument that actually really what real freedom is choosing what your own limitations are, choosing where it's like, okay, like this is this is who I am. This is what I'm committed to. This is who I'm committed to. And like basically building your own little fence posts around your life of like, these are my parameters. I'm not going outside of that.
That's what you do.
I'm all about that.
You always say that.
Yeah. And it's people right now, people are just like, oh no fences, do everything, fucking be everything, fuck everything.
Please everyone.
Like, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you do that, it all feels meaningless because you're not sacrificing anything. It's the actual giving up of other things
Right.
that makes what you have feel important.
It's like I'm talking to myself, but he's smart.
That's what I said. I was like, this guy's like you,
Absolutely
but smarter.
incredible.
If you want to just like,
What it would be like.
hire me out for dinner
I will.
parties
I will. I will. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just show up with him.
Yeah, that's
Be like,
smart.
it's
That's actually
Steve.
way
What are you
better.
talking
That's
about?
better.
It's Steve. It sounds like him.
You can stay home,
Yeah.
watch Netflix.
No
Like,
problem.
I'll go to the wedding.
I'm into
like,
that.
Yeah. I love it. Well, where can they find you, Mark?
markmanson.net, and then
And then Amazon, every bookstore. Go
Every
get
bookstore
the new
ever.
the new book. We like to end the podcast episode by saying like a final thought. So, do you have a final thought you would like to leave with?
Earth is round, man. I'm gonna put it out there.
That's
Controversial.
controversial. Yeah,
Wow.
that's really
Yeah.
controversial.
But I'm
over
trying
here.
to open my mind to what you're saying and challenge my former self. You know? For me, it's I remember I was a very uptight young man. I was like, no sex till marriage, no drugs, no alcohol, all this stuff.
Nerd.
And, yeah, and I hate that guy now,
Wow.
and I do my best to destroy him every single
Maybe you
time
should
I
embrace
get on
him.
mic
Maybe
or
just
video.
embrace
It's funny
him a
because
little
I
bit.
was the opposite of that.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm gonna fuck everybody and do everything and who
See,
cares?
he's a way cooler version
Way
of
cooler,
you.
better
Way
version.
cooler.
It's like, what if I was a good person too? It's unbelievable.
I like pain.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why I got into acting was because I just find it fascinating that like that's the one thing that's really relatable to
Yeah.
everybody is if you look at any character in any movie or TV show, they're all experiencing some sort of pain, and to them, their pain is the greatest. Like I could have a broken arm and you have cancer, but even though you're gonna die from yours, my broken arm is way more painful.
It affects you more.
Yeah, it affects you more, and I just think that putting it into that scope of like relating it to or being able to transmute it to like a purpose
Yeah.
is awesome,
Yeah.
and I feel like people instead of bitching on Twitter, maybe you just like take that and take that pain, like use it,
Build
but like
something.
use it into purpose instead.
So here's my real last thought,
Yeah.
because that was very, very well said, and
Thank
it,
you.
and it made me think of something. Two things. One is I think what you just said is exactly why I think it's so dangerous for people to get in this business of like trying to measure, like, oh, I'm more pain than you are. My pain was
Yes.
worse than yours, so shut up and listen to me.
No, I'm the biggest victim.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't measure this stuff. It's so subjective and it's so contextual. But the other thing, so cool story about subtle art, that kind of bring it full circle. When we were shopping subtle art around to all these different publishers, some of them kind of got it. Some of them definitely did not get it at all. And then I walked into the meeting at Harper with my editor, Luke Dempsey, and sat down. And the first thing he said, I'm a cancer survivor. It's the best thing that ever happened in my life. And I'm going to publish this book. And I was like, fuck, I'm in.
That's
Like,
great.
Wow.
Don't even need to talk to anybody else. Like, this guy gets it. So,
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, go buy the book. The new book, both books. You know what? Fuck it. Buy both
Buy-
books.
buy
Go buy
both.
both
all
books.
the books.
Buy all the books.
Get
Buy
the
the
package.
audiobook.
You can check it out
Yeah.
on Amazon. There's a package with got both of them on it.
If you're listening when this episode comes out, Mark would still be on tour, so you can go check him out on tour.
Yep.
Also follow social medias, all of that stuff. Also follow our social medias at Should They Don't Tell You Should They Don't Tell You on Instagram and at Should They Don't on Twitter. And you can email us podcast@nikki.limo for topic suggestions if you'd like to. And thank you so much for being here, Mark.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
we
You were
appreciate it.
phenomenal.
This was fun.
Yes.
Hey, real quick, whatever you're going through out there, as long as you're building something while you're going through it, I think that will help you.
You already had a
Thanks.
final
That's
thought.
that's my real final thought. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
It was a nice final.
That was
It's a
nice.
final.
His first one was your bio.
Well, it was about me. It was selfish. It was very
It
selfish.
was very selfish.
Yeah.